All right. We are live here with this live edition of the New Warehouse podcast. This is a very special edition, I will say, because we have a great lineup of panelists today. And we are going to be diving into and talking about some of the warehouse technology trends for 2026, which is super exciting for me because, as you know, the new warehouse is always looking at what the warehouse or the new warehouse is going to look like of the future, right? And we have some great panelists from across different aspects of the industry, specifically looking at different technologies as well, and looking at different parts of the industry and operations to kind of understand what they're seeing. So if you're joining us here today, thank you for coming in. Thank you for attending. We welcome your questions. We welcome your thoughts on technologies that you're looking at or technologies that you're curious about. I think our panelists today are well seasoned and well experienced and knowledgeable to be able to field those questions, give you your thoughts on maybe what's legitimate from a technology perspective, what's viable in the next year, and what's maybe too far out or maybe is just far out in general from a feasibility perspective. But we're joining you here today, and we want to tell you about where we all are going to be as well. On November 13th, we are going to be at the Element Logic Trade Show, which is happening in New Jersey, which half of our panelists today are from New Jersey, including myself, Nick, and Brian. And we are going to be there November 13th, starts at 10 a.m. And I'll throw up the full info over top of us here. Happening in Carlstadt, New Jersey, hosted by Element Logic. It is the Automation Innovation Trade Show. And that is going to be in Element Logic's showcase room and demo center, which is like a small warehouse, which is really cool. They have actual kind of setups there and equipment in there. And there's going to be about 30 different exhibitors, including our panelists today, to check out, and make sure you come. And it's in New Jersey, of course. So we love that. At least half the panelists love that, I will say today. So let's get into our discussion today and introduce our panelist. We have somebody representing from software today, which is Brian Kirst of Snapfulfil. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Very well. Thanks for having me on again, Kevin.
Of course. Yeah, Brian's been on a marathon with us here at the new warehouse. So he's almost at the finish line, we'll say, but we'll see. And then on the robotics side, we have Sharem Addverb joining us. How you doing, sir?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to get you on here as well. On the wearable side, we got Robbie Moss, Vuzix. How are you?
Doing great. Good to be here, Kevin.
Good to have you. Good to have you. And then on the packaging end of line sign, we got Nick Silicato of Centric Packaging and GreenLink. Nick, how are you?
It is an honor, Kevin. It's been a long time coming. You can see our original box up here, the new warehouse.
That is the exclusive, the new warehouse packaging that Nick produced for us in the past that we used as part of our ProMad, Modex display and things like that in our trade show booth. So happy to see that there. I still got some of those in the archives too as well, the new warehouse archives, which is my basement basically. So happy to see that. So thank you guys for joining us today and lending us your knowledge, your insights on what you're seeing in the industry. When we talk about some of these technologies and innovations that we're seeing in the warehouse space, I think the cause for a lot of these, right, is some of the challenges that we see out there. And so I wanted to kick this off and kind of, real quick, get a sense of, maybe one or two different challenges, probably the largest challenges that you're seeing in the industry, and kind of set the stage for, what is spurring some of this innovation and the technology that we're seeing coming in. Because I will say, like, our space, it's super exciting because some of the technology that's happening, I mean, it's really cutting edge stuff that's kind of out there, but is finding like those practical applications in the warehouse. So Sharem, you want to kick us off here? Let us know what is the largest challenge that you see in operations?
Yeah, I think supply chain on a whole, if you look at the landscape, right? We've looked at planning, sourcing, distribution, delivery. I think traditionally planning has seen a lot of innovation, demand forecasting. I think those are the basics for supply chain. But I think over the last, maybe at the start of the decade, maybe at the early 2000s, once e-commerce boom really came in, I think there was a world where uh, I think it gave birth to what I like to call supply chain 2.0.
Mm.
Because I think all along we've seen industrial automation growing significantly. There's industrial automation 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the rise of consumerism happened, like I said, in the early 90s, probably here in this part of the world, probably early 2000s in the rest of the world. So I think what got really sandwiched in between was supply chain, right? Because there's a lot of innovation happening on the manufacturing side. There's massive demand happening on the consumerism side. And supply chain really started getting sandwiched because that's like the bridge that brings these two worlds together. And I think that led to a lot more innovation or problem statements to solve for on the distribution and delivery side of the business of supply chain rather than on the planning side. And I think what I see today is distribution and delivery on a whole is no longer a cost center. I think it's becoming more of a profit center because customer experience, customer loyalty is what is driving your business today, right? And I think, getting delivery on time in full, but also meeting commitments, going above commitments is what decides a consumer from buying from brand A versus brand B. So I think a lot of the problem statements are around meeting commitments, but also adapting to changing environments, right? I think we went through this COVID wave. Now we're going through this, what I like to call the tariff wave. So
Sure.
constantly
Yeah.
supply chain professionals are having to adapt to changing norms. And I think just coming up with strategies to tackle that is going to be what I think everyone needs to focus on. So I think adaptability to changing needs of the customer, but also the manufacturer is where supply chain needs to really question itself and ask itself for answers.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of seeing, obviously the consumer is expectations are high, right? And they're wanting flexibility, but now seeing it on kind of the other side too, like the beginning of the chain from supplier, manufacturer side, having that flexibility too. So Robbie, what are your thoughts? What is the largest challenge you're seeing in operations?
Yeah, so with the wearables side, where we're focused is really on the floor speed to execution. So if I'm thinking about how fast I have to go to pick to actually meet what Saran was talking about, so customers have demand and providers need flexibility. So for us to be able to give at least solutions on the software side and the hardware side that are on par or faster with some of the top technologies that are already deployed as wearables in the warehouse. So we're focused on smart glasses, heads-up displays, and taking some of those technologies, putting them together to give the user an experience where they don't have to have so many peripherals and things like that, scanners and different things. We're putting that all in one device. And so we'll be showing some of that at Element Logic at the trade show on the floor there. But it's really about speed on the floor as you're doing your supply chain execution. But for us, speed to deploy on the software side, giving some user experience flexibility as we deploy solutions on the wearables.
Yeah, absolutely. So giving some different flexibility and how to execute on those tasks, basically.
Yes.
And Nick, what about on your side? I'm curious what you're seeing from challenges, because you're dealing with some corrugate where there's some stuff going on there too, right?
Yeah. So on the packaging side, you'll notice that the other two guys that went, they didn't talk about the packaging side of things. They talked about picking. That was the first thing. So the upstream stuff gets a lot more attention than the end of the lines things in the warehouse because of the variables that we see, right? So on the operations side, picking operation, you have a couple different variables, but you're still picking a good and putting it somewhere, right? On the outbound packaging side, we have what type of product is it? Is it going to break in transit? Does it need to be protected? Do we have to pack that with sustainable materials? So there's a lot more nuance that goes into putting like a good piece of automation in rather than fitting a square peg in a round hole, right? We need to really think about the end user experience, the unboxing experience, what type of effect that has from a marketing perspective. All of this brand identity that goes into packaging and what the end user experience is, while also trying to help gain efficiency enhance ergonomics, make it more sustainable from a packaging materials perspective. All of those things go into what we think about on the packaging side. So we have to look at every single end user use case specifically and make sure that we have the right solution to put in place for them. So it's really difficult. It's hard to put a blanket statement out on there just because of all those variables that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of changes happening as we talked about here. And it's really a ton of variables, as you mentioned, Nick, to try and keep up with. And I will say to the audience too, anyways, listening, if you want to drop what you see as the largest challenge, maybe for you or for operators, throw that in the comments as well. And now, Brian, from your perspective, what do you see as the largest challenge for operators right now and heading into the new year?
Yeah, just in a general sense, we're very focused inside the four walls in the warehouse. I think what Shram said around, the sort of other ends and the outside kind of squeezing and causing challenges in the middle. I think the warehouse specifically is impacted by that. Right now, I would say some big challenges that we're seeing is labor, scarcity, retention, finding labor and keeping good labor. So increasing efficiencies within the warehouse to adapt to those challenges. And then all of these other solutions we're talking about, whether it's solutions to accommodate some of the packaging that Nick has out there. There's a lot of these point solutions or the wearable, integrating with the software that's controlling the wearable. Integration becomes a key for a lot of operations right now. How are they orchestrating and integrating with all of the other technology that's happening within the warehouse? I think that that's becoming more and more a focus, and it's always been a focus, but getting it right now is critical to most operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's really interesting to hear some of these challenges, and a lot of what I'm hearing is kind of the flexibility and how do we, be agile? How are we able to adapt to this changing environment, and a lot of these variabilities, and a lot of that tends to spur innovation and new technology and new ways to look at these things and be able to address some of these challenges. So I want to talk about some of these technologies that are either, coming out or evolving as we're heading into the new year, and kind of what operators should be looking at and what should they be considering. So I want to kick it off on the software side here. So I'm gonna point it to you, Brian, here, and I think I want to kick it off on the software side because I think that is such a foundational component, right, underlying a lot of the technology that we're seeing from a hardware perspective, et cetera. So Brian, what are you seeing from a software perspective heading into 26, and are you seeing that the two-letter word AI, right, is that playing like a huge part in how software is evolving when we look at the future here?
I'm sorry, AI that's not an acronym I'm familiar with.
It stands for artificial intelligence. Yes.
I was going to say it took us 15 minutes to drop that word, so good
job. I think if you're a software provider or an automation provider, if you don't have AI on your roadmap, or you're talking to your customers about AI, you're probably a bit ignorant to where things are moving. However, I think similar to we talked a little earlier about automation, and the focus was on picking, right? Every with the first wave of automation focused on picking, but I would argue the best automation starts to happen in the more labor intense areas where you see container unloading and packing and areas that are super labor intense and harder to automate, right? Those become more impressive. Because those folks were very deliberate about the problems they wanted to solve. I think the same is going to be true for AI. The folks that are very deliberate and calculated about the real problems they want to solve, for me, it would be within the warehouse operation, are going to have the more impactful solutions that come out. We know there's the obvious uses of AI as chat bots and in-app support and things like that. Yeah. There's the obvious picking efficiencies that you can get. But I think when you start to look at the real use cases for AI within a warehouse around decision-making, resource planning, process changes. You start to see the real power of AI beyond just the obvious. So I think AI is definitely on everybody's mind as a user. I think you have to be really informed and really question your provider if they're coming too early to market with an AI solution. I think there are some things that are some solutions out there that are still really relying on really good algorithms and not necessarily AI. So I think buyer beware right now. It is a buzzword if folks are trying to monetize. But I think the providers who are deliberate and calculated about their deployment of AI are going to be the ones that rise to the top with the impact of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point too about, being cautious around, are they having AI just for the sake of saying they have AI, right? Because I think it was pretty interesting to see, over the last 2 years, kind of the trend of you go walk like the trade show floor, right? And it's all of a sudden like, now this company is .ai, now this company is .ai, now this company is .ai, right? So it's interesting to see that. So I'm curious, Shahram, from your perspective, because robotics obviously is like a piece of hardware, but like the brain behind that hardware is from the software perspective. So what are you seeing from the software side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think as hard it is hardware to sustain, I think it's a very symbiotic relationship, right? I think hardware without software and software without hardware, I think that world doesn't exist. I think right from as simple as a phone that we deal with to robots on the floor, it's a nice amalgamation of both. But I think honestly, software as a term has been very loosely used in our industry. I think it's just now people are starting to understand the various layers that go behind it. I think we were at a world where warehouse management was the only thing anyone knew inside any software that runs a warehouse. But then we had warehouse control systems coming in. And I think because management couldn't do a few things, control couldn't do a few things, the world of execution came in, right? So which is kind of a combination of execution. And now people are talking about orchestration, which is a layer above execution. So I think as a customer and and we've been users ourselves of automation before we started the company at Addverb, I think it's very important that these layers are a little bit more educated and simplified. As simple as it sounds, but I think there's a lot more to it. I think those layers are getting a little mixed. I think from our point of view, I think here at Addverb, we have just kept it very simple, right? I think we look at it like slices of a sandwich or a burger, right? You have management, you have control, you have execution, you have orchestration. Depending on the amount of automation that is there in the warehouse, those layers get peeled off, right? So if you're just automating 10% of your workflows, stick to having a good WMS. I think someone like Snapfulfil, might be the good fit for you. But then as you keep, adding more automated workflows, that's when the layers of what level of control does a WMS have, what level of control the robotics and the WES layer has, those conversations become very prudent. And I think that's kind of where we are seeing a lot more of the warehouse automation companies, robotics companies, leveling up their game on the software side, because they know that some of the existing WMSs out there, may or may not be able to fulfill the promises of uptime, speed, labor performances, etc. And so I think basically what I'm trying to say is I think it's getting very murky. I think robotics players are getting into software, and software companies are realizing the need to embrace robotics more and more because you can't build a WMS just around people and process. I think robot as an agent needs to be identified and kept in the center of everything that you do when you develop a software for running your warehouses. So I think that's kind of where I'm seeing this world going.
Interesting. Yeah. Great perspective there. And I think, that's a great point about, now involving not just the process and the human, right, that's involved in the process, but also the robotics component too, as well. So when we look at that and we look at, multiple different solutions, right, one of the challenges here, and I think Scott kind of called this out a little bit in the comment too, he said a huge challenge is interconnecting multiple systems to create a cohesive benefit for the organization, right? right? So maybe I'll just open this up to the group here. I mean, what do you see in terms of, because obviously one of the challenges, right, is integrating these different systems, right? And it's very hard, I will say, for an operation to be like just one provider, right? I mean, you're going to end up with multiple providers, and how do you get them to kind of come together? So what are you seeing on, I guess, kind of the evolution of integration, and how is that maybe getting easier or maybe getting harder? What do you guys think?
I'll take a crack at it, and then I agree with Shahram there. I think our view, from a Snapfulfil perspective within the warehouse, we started to move away from viewing the people, and we start to look at resources. So an RF is just another resource. There could be an AMR, there could be some kind of an ASRS or some other resource that we're interacting with. Orchestrating is the word that folks like to use, and that's what. So we did build the Snap Control module to do that, because we saw the trend of our customers moving away from purely people-driven processes and starting to deploy, whether it's some smart conveyor or an AMR, or all of these different automations. So we created Snap Control to say, okay, we need to take that work and then identify which automation or resource it needs to go to. And we made that, as flexible as, the configuration of the system. We made it somewhat of a bidirectional communication. So if the automation were to go down or reach capacity, we can divert that work, take back work, divert it to a different resource so that the work is still flowing. Nothing is coming down. Whereas a traditional integration might push all the work over. And if it goes down, it's sort of stuck there, or you have to backtrack and redo some, re-import some files, things like that. We're working in a bidirectional way through messaging and things like that. So definitely, I think tying all of those resources together to give the operators the flexibility and choice and adaptability for their operation, that they can select the best automation, the best solutions, and not be limited by some integration or some limit within the WMS or the other provider. So I think offering a cohesive way to pull all those resources in is key to having a well-run operation.
Got it. And Robbie, what do you think? Because you guys are integrating right from a wearable perspective.
Yeah, so we try to be as flexible as possible for whatever the back end, the WMS for for Snapfulfil. I'm assuming would have something like a RESTful API that would let us just jump right on it in a modern way, right? So, but we can go all the way from that level all the way to something that's homegrown and have some point-to-point integrations as well. And we're focused on the workflows, as I mentioned before, they're on the floor. So and as Brian said, the human-driven workflows that are happening on the floor. And I did kind of throw out the picking word earlier, but it's any workflow. So it's picking, packing, cycle count, whatever you need to do. And what we try to do is make it flexible, but also as simple as possible. So whatever achieves the use case and the result that's needed on the floor for the user, and also allows us to give the user the experience that is, I wouldn't say pared down, but we only want to give them, you hear this in logistics all the time, the right information at the right time. Well, you can get in trouble when you put a lot of eye candy in front of somebody in a heads-up display or on smart glasses. So we focus on integrating with the system, taking the data, giving it to them on the floor, so they're eyes up and hands free, and we just get out of the way of the work. That's kind of the way we describe it. We try to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, I like that, getting out of the way of the work. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Nick, what about your thoughts? What do you see like kind of the end of line there?
No, we're seeing a lot of those pointed solutions, right? Work instructions, how many sheets of tissue paper am I going to wrap this shirt in? Where do I put the label, right? So we always say that those end of the line solutions are really reliant on the Snapfulfils of the world to get the right data to them. What is this product? Where is it going? We have, shout out to GreenLink. We have a cold chain packaging module, right? Where we're basically taking the ship from and the ship to and telling them what type of liner to ship it in, how many gel packs to put in the box, just to make sure that your, Blue Apron order gets to you and it's still cold enough to be, to eat it without you getting sick, right? So really we're at the mercy of Brian's Snapfulfil and these other WMS systems, giving us all of the necessary data, the accurate data, and then presenting that to the packer. So really the integrations are the most important piece of what we're doing with those pointed work instruction solutions that we have for the packers that are actually touching the product at the end of the line.
Interesting, definitely, and we definitely want that food to be edible. Yeah, when it arrives. Yeah. Don't make me sick, Nick. Don't make me sick. And Sriram, I mean, what about on your side? Because obviously robotics is a huge piece of integration, but we do see some solutions too now that are coming out that are automated that say like no integration required in some regards. So what's your view there, and what are you seeing on kind of the integration space right now?
No, I think integration should not be seen as it should be more than a want. It should be a necessity, because I think we are living in a world where I think being truly democratic is the way to go. Because I think if supply chain automation, and I'm just going to throw in all our technologies in there, has to grow, I think it's important we collaborate more. Be it a robotics company, be it a wearable company, be it a packaging company. I think we cannot kind of not see eye to eye on some of these technologies, because that's the only way this industry can grow. If you look at manufacturing automation, I keep going back to that because that's really the North Star, right? I mean, you look at automotive factories, you look at automobile factories that are highly automated. And the only reason it is so because a lot of different companies came together to build a car, right? And of course, likes of the Fords of the world made it all happen. But we really need to have integration as a necessity, and being a little bit more open source and keeping it all open and flexible is the need of the hour, is the way I see it. And I think it's easy for a robotics company to say, you know what, just try this, don't need to integrate. It's an easy sell, but does it help the customer in the long run? I don't think so, right? Eventually, the WMSs need to be talking to the robotics or the device layer. WMSs need to be talking to the OMSs, tie into ERP, tie into TMS, because the efficiency in supply chain, unfortunately, doesn't stop at a node, right? You can make all the savings you want at a warehouse level, but if you, turn blind eye towards outside the four walls of the warehouse, as a supply chain professional, I'm not able to give the value back to my management to say, hey, I've saved cost for you, because that's what I think. I feel like integration should be something that we all have to embrace a lot more faster, and just be a lot more collaborative in everything that we do. So I think that's kind of the mindset with which we have started our company, and we want to be partnering with companies who are open to that philosophy, because that's the only way the industry can really scale and grow. To see more than 10% of the world's warehouse automated, it's a very poor number, right? We got to make it better.
Yeah. A lot of room for opportunity and growth and adaptability there, right? So, and that's a very interesting perspective too, from the collaborative point, right? Because I think that there are so many different solutions out there, so many different use cases that people are trying to automate and attack with technology. So I guess on that same kind of note there, I mean, Sriram, from your perspective, from a robotics perspective, we kind of talked about the software side here, but from a robotics perspective, what are you seeing kind of going into the next year? There are some of the use cases that are kind of top of mind for people to look to bring in a robotic application or some type of automated application.
Yeah, I think maybe this year, and maybe I think for years to come, I feel like we'll see a world where these two philosophies of automations will come together, right? I think all along, in the right from the 1940s, 50s, ASRS cranes were around, right? It's not a new technology, and I kind of categorize those kind of technologies under fixed automation. Bolted on the ground, pretty reliable, pretty fast, generally a lot more denser in terms of storage efficiency and things like that. And then I think once Amazon kind of purchased Kiva, back in early 2000s, it gave a rise to flexible automation, AMRs, AGVs of the world, which kind of sold the concept of mobility, flexibility, scalability. But I think what I see after discussing a lot with my customers is they need a little bit of both. I think there's best of both worlds is what you need. And I think the topic we spoke about earlier, the software, bridging these two philosophies together is where I see the world moving towards. Because with fixed automation, you get a lot more speed, reliability, but you lack flexibility, right? Like I said, it's bolted on the floor. Once you install, pallet racking on the floor, it's not easy to remove and move it on. But on the other hand, robots traditionally have not been the fastest. They're not, when you don't associate. So things are changing now, but generally speaking, they're not the fastest piece of agent that runs the warehouse, right? So I do see the amalgamation of these two worlds, kind of where we see a lot more use cases happening. The other thing I'll throw in there is, going back to collaboration, is multi-agent orchestration and integration, right? I think we have to be open to a world where we very well might have one of our competitors who makes a robot in the same facility as we are providing a robot, because that's what makes sense. You can't be solving problems for everyone every time very well, right? So I do see this whole concept of provider A, provider B's robots working in the same facility, and then either a WMS or a strong WES orchestrating that those two technologies to come together to finally add value to the customer, which is kind of being that 5-10 minutes ahead of time, delivering on time in full. So I think at a very 30,000 feet lens, that's where I see the world of robotics in warehouses going, and I hope we are in that mode, because again, going back to, that's how this industry can scale and offer good value to our end customers.
Yeah, interesting. And what about Nick, from your perspective? What are you seeing like in the robotics world? What are some of your customers like looking at or asking about in terms of like use cases to add robotics to?
Yeah, so currently we're still living in the auto palletizer world. Is wonderful if you're palletizing a lot of the same items, right? And then we have the auto boxing solutions, the pack sizes of the world, and the CMCs of the world that are building those boxes for us to right size the packaging. Both are great solutions, but to Shram's point, we need that flexibility on the packaging piece. So we see a lot of booths at Pack Expo that have robotic arms putting products into boxes, but it's working at 3 a minute, 5 a minute, something like that. It's still really slow, right? Your operator on any given point, any given point in the day is going to do somewhere close to like 12 a minute if they're really working at the pace that they should be working at, with some type of helping solution from an automation point, meaning like light automation, like an auto bagger or a tape machine or something like that. So we're seeing a lot of these hybrid automation pieces come into place. A scanner that scans how much void is in the box and then either automatically places it in the box or shoots out the right amount of dunnage that's going to fill that void that's in the box. So the automation, the flexible automation we're seeing right now is it's taking the thought process out of the packaging process, right? So we have auto boxing, and they're wonderful for non-fragile items, right? So hardware, apparel, shoes, anything along those lines that you're not going to break. But then you have a lot of companies that are shipping auto parts and dishes and high touch items like the cold chain packaging that I was talking about before. So you're going to need a human touch at least through 2026, right? Because that's what we're talking about here, to make sure that those things are packaged the right way. What I think will happen over time is that we'll be able to have, more AI-based vision systems that will be able to tell you what needs to go in that box. It won't need as much human touch, even with the fragile items, right? I also see a trend that has already started to happen with modular box on demand solutions. So they'll build the box for you. You can put the product in the box, pick the carton if you'd like to, but then you still have that gap in the system where you can add the void fill or the dunnage to make sure that product is adequately wrapped or adequately cushioned, just to make sure that it's going to get to the end user in one piece. So I still think there's a long way to go to get to the amount of flexibility that we will need on the packaging side of things. But it is certainly moving much faster now than it has over the last 10 years. So great to see that. Still a long way to go. There are some great solutions that are out there already, but again, we're up against all of those variables that we have to find solutions for. So we still are pretty reliant on that human touch.
Interesting. And that dunnage thing sounds pretty cool. I gotta see what that looks like.
Check out the Storopack 3DS system.
StorePack 3DS system. All right. We got to take a look at that for sure. Yeah. Yep. And Robbie, what about on your side? What do you see from like a robotics perspective?
So for robotics, what we're hearing from customers is that they want to be able to do remote support. So if I have some automation or robotics that go down in the warehouse, I'm losing time. I'm not able to execute on deliveries and things like that, or storage. And so I may have a technician somewhere else in the world or somewhere in another part of the country that can look over my shoulder if I have some smart glasses on. And take a look at what I'm seeing, and we can get it up and running again very quickly. And I've heard stories of massive Teams calls when the certain warehouses are down for more than 30 minutes. And so then everybody gets
that's
on.
A long time in the warehouse world, I'll say. That's
absolutely. So they're on top of it, but they want to be able to do something hands-free and not necessarily use an iPad or their smartphone, right? So they want to have the guy working on it be hands-free, and then everybody can remote in and see what they see. From a robotics perspective, that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too. And I think that's something, to think about too, when you start to look at these robotic solutions and the automation solutions, like what does support, what does maintenance look like? Like, how do we, keep up with this? I mean, I remember a project I did a few years ago when I was working in the warehouse world, and that was something that we did not think about. What was support going to look like from an internal facility perspective after the team integration team was gone, right? We kind of got stuck there and had to scramble a little bit. So really interesting that approach there. And now, Brian, from your perspective, I mean, you're from a WMS perspective, Snap Control perspective, you guys are connecting to these robotic solutions. What are you seeing is some of your customers like looking at and interested in and bringing into their operations from robots?
We're definitely seeing a massive uptick in the interest in automation and robotics within the warehouse, especially in the mid-market, which I think is where we're seeing it go. It's cost effective now. The costs have come down. Barriers to entry have come down. There's a lot of options. And not to even get extremely automated. I mean, some simple pick to light, some light technology, some conveyance. The flexibility is key. These flexible solutions are what operations are looking for, especially in the 3PL space. You don't want to be, put all your eggs in one automation basket, because your commodity types and customer base are changing all the time. So we're seeing almost, I would say on a regular basis, probably half or more of our opportunities, new opportunities, have some automation on their roadmap. And I would say to folks who are listening, if you think automation is still too expensive, or it doesn't fit your warehouse operation, or you don't see, you should reach out and talk to some folks, some of the folks on here, or some of the folks that are going to be at the Element show, because I think people will be surprised, and operators who aren't maybe that connected to our space and understand the trends would be surprised. Some of the lower cost and easy to implement automation options that are out there that can really increase efficiencies around the warehouse. It's much more attainable and accessible than it was, when I was an operator, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a really kind of good call out there, because, you look at, there's just so many options, right? And that can be a little daunting in itself, just to navigate that a little bit. And I think I remember, Brian, we talked, this was quite some time ago, when we were talking about your old 3PLs you had. And I remember the one thing you said was like, oh, you wish that you looked at automation sooner. Right. And that was, that was, as you said, several years ago at this point. Right. So, now even more the case, I think there's more solutions that can fit into, those different type of levels of 3PLs or operations, just in general. Looks like, we got a question here. This is a good one. I like this one on the robotics side. So I know Addverb is into humanoids. Is that true? Is that true? And are you guys going to touch on that? So let's talk about that. What does everybody think about humanoid robotics in the warehouse? Shram, he called out Addverb specifically, so you want to start?
Yeah, and it put me on a spot. It's one of those things that we don't talk about because it's kind of but No, look, it's very real. I mean, Adverb is in the journey of building its own humanoid. Hopefully, in another 12 to 18 months or so, we'll have a ready prototype that we can release to the rest of the world. But I mean, the way we look at robotics is we look at robotics as a combination of 4 form factors. I think all that we are all used to is seeing wheeled robots, right? AMR, AGV. Um, and that's been around and that will continue to be around. The other form factor we see is legged robots. So we actually also have our own quadrupeds that we are releasing, and it's actually commercially available now in some parts of the world, which will be used for surveillance applications. So these are legged robots. So these are the dog robots that you guys must have seen a lot of cool videos around.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the other piece that we see another form factor. The third form factor is just robotic arms. I think collaborative arms is something we are building as well. These are arms that can work alongside an operator. So think of a pick station or kitting station where an operator is working, but you'll also have the robot working alongside him. And whenever him or her is around that robot, it'll slow down or increase the speed depending on the vicinity. So that's the third form factor. And the final form factor, which is a combination of all of these, is humanoid. So legs, hands, arms, and everything else that looks exactly like a human. So we believe that the world of tomorrow, there'll be probably 10 million, 10 billion people to 10 billion robots, or even more, because I think that's the world that we will probably be living in. But having said that, I think we are still far away from all of this reality. I think the buzz is there. I think the tech is there. The compute power, the ratio of compute power to cost is really, really encouraging right now. So we do see that becoming a reality, but I think it'll be a slow burn in looking at some of the activities which requires dexterity, right? Like human hands is the best technology in the world. We don't really appreciate it well enough, but some of those activities within the warehouse, within the factory, where human hands will be useful, is where I think humanoids will act first. It doesn't have to look like humans, is what we believe, because humans by nature have some limitations too. Like we would rather have a humanoid with wheels because then it'll be faster. Why do you want to constrain yourself with legs? So that's kind of the tangent at which we are looking at humanoids. But it's still work in progress. But we definitely see, just why we released another website of our own. To your point, we have an addverb.ai on our site too, which is an advanced robotics division of Addverb. But all of these world will come together, and that's the world that we want to be in, where humanoids with AMR, AGV, with some machines kind of working together to replicate whatever human intelligence can provide. But it's also not about replacing humans. I think it's about what can we do together even more powerful, right? Humans plus robots. And that's why our tagline says humans, robots, and possibilities. So I think the possibilities are endless, and we are just scratching the surface of what that might look like.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting to hear kind of what you're working on and how you're looking at it, because I think when I first started seeing humanoids too, I mean, that was my question. It's like, why does it have to look like human? Like, why does it have to look like me? Like, that's a little creepy in a sense, right? So very interesting there on the humanoid side, and if we look at the robotic side and the human themselves, right? We're also looking at a lot of technologies that are kind of augmenting the human in a sense, like making them more productive, making them be able to do the work of 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, as many people as we possibly can in a way. So Robbie, from a wearable perspective, from a smart glasses perspective, which is what you guys are focused on at Vuzix, how do you kind of view the evolution of some of this wearable technology that's going on, and what does that look like for the users and the operators in the warehouse?
Right. So I mentioned earlier, eyes up and hands free, right? So we want to give the user the ability to have some visual confirmation. If you think of scanning, you might use a scanner or something along those lines, but we're trying to take those peripherals away and give you that fully hands-free experience. So you can focus on the work, as I mentioned before, but also have some visual confirmation. So you might have voice, you would have voice, so it's vision plus voice. Using the camera to scan barcodes. So we talked a little bit about AI before. And so AI is on our roadmap, but we are also using a little bit of ML right now to be able to read any kind of barcode, to actually do OCR, to read text. So where you don't have a label, and sometimes if you see in a warehouse where you're scanning and you don't have a barcode that you can scan, you end up having some mispicks. We see that sometimes. Where people will pick the wrong thing, they'll look at it and think they're reading the right thing. So we have some validation that's built in. So that's where we're evolving over the next, I think, year. And we've got our LX1, which is our purpose designed and built for warehousing operations, as the heads-up display. So I think that's where we're headed over the next year, and using the camera, using more AI, and giving the user the ability to be, as you said, augmented, and be coached along in their work that they're doing, if we're able to really leverage the AI that's on the roadmap.
Interesting. And you're going to have those on display at the show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking forward to playing with those a little bit, definitely, and seeing what they look like as a glasses, where traditionally a non-smart glasses where, I guess,
Right.
regular.
Right.
Me and Nick. So definitely interested in seeing that, and I'm curious, around that, when you look at, kind of augmenting the human and giving them these kind of tools like smart glasses to make them more productive, give them that information and data and even confirmation, as you mentioned, through some of the capture there as well. How do you see kind of the balance between like the augmented human worker and then like the robotics automation side? Like, how do you kind of, I guess, decipher that and navigate that for your customers?
Yeah. So if we're thinking about a humanoid robot, I think we'll be working alongside those guys in the near future. I want to put my pre-order in for the laundry folding robot with Saram when they come out with that one to get out of the warehouse. But no, I think we'll be working alongside any of the different robotics. You have the ability to display for the human worker some information they might need, and so there are use cases out there where we could do that. I think we're still exploring some of that, but we definitely see that coming, and we know that that's in the future. So I think we're going to be navigating some of that just like everybody else.
Interesting. Any other thoughts from the panels on that? On kind of the balance between the human worker and the automated or robotic worker?
Yeah, I personally think that from the packaging side, it's the next best step for us at the end of the line, right? So right now we're entering into the holidays. Happy Halloween tomorrow, everyone. Hope you all dress up and wear your best costumes. But like I said, we still need that human touch. But as we enter into the holidays, a lot of our end users, especially folks that are doing mainly e-commerce fulfillment, are hiring 50% more temps right now that have no training. Quality of the outbound product goes way down. With the Vuzix product, that training time gets cut down. I mean, I'm sure you have a metric on that, Robbie. It gets cut way down. The quality goes way up, and the efficiency is pretty much a solid baseline on the packaging side. So that's best next step for us on the augmented human from a packaging perspective. So what Robbie's doing is perfect for our actual users of boxes and tape and everything else right now. So we'll be talking soon, Robbie.
Yeah. 10-4.
There we go. Yeah. Brian, Sharam, you got anything to say about that? Kind of the balance between the human worker and the automated worker?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think augmenting that is key. There's just not enough human labor to meet the demand of the supply chain industry, specifically when you get into the warehouse. So I think finding those ways to augment, whether it's through a deployment of some type of humanoid robotics or even much more simpler automation, folks have to look to augmenting that labor there's this continued push to bring the products closer to the people. There's not a lot of labor to support that. So automation and robotics is going to be key to those operations.
All right. And Sharam, your thoughts?
I think the panel has said, quite wisely around finding the right balance, I think, is going to be key, because I think the general sense is, are these humanoids or robotics and automation going to take over jobs? We are living in a very tricky geopolitical setup. It just doesn't seem to get simpler as day goes by. So employment is important. People need to have jobs. But I think what people have to think is, how can we make jobs more upskilled? I think human intelligence is still very underestimated. I think humans are the most intelligent, being in the world. I don't think a robot can get to that point so easily, especially when you have to take emotional decisions, right? I mean, some of these are gut calls, and I don't think I know with generative AI, these things are becoming a lot more accessible. But I think finding that right balance is important. I think I still feel robotics, automation, I'll throw in humanoids too, is still good for repetitive tasks, tasks which does not require too much of thinking, but it's just, speed and efficiency and consistency. And you let humans decide where do they want to play a humanoid versus a human, right? So I think the collaboration is going to be key. Human working with a humanoid is where we need to be focused, rather than just having humanoids take over jobs. Because, like I said, human intelligence is still going to be the key driver for success.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, to Brian's point, right, we're certainly at a point, and we're getting to a point where it's just going to be even more challenging to get people to do these types of roles, right? But to your point, Shram, I mean, that the human element, that human touch, right, is still going to be critical for some of these decisions and these actions that need to be made, because we see, as we talked about kind of earlier in the conversation, that the human, the consumer, right, I mean, their expectations continue to grow, right, and they want to feel special, right? They want to feel more and more special, and a lot of e-commerce brands, in trying to make them feel special, come up with these crazy ideas to do certain things that will make them feel special, but are very hard to automate or make like standardized in an operation, right? So it's interesting to see kind of that balance and discuss that there. So if anybody has questions in the audience, I encourage you to leave them in the comments here as we get close to the close of the discussion. But I want to go around the panel here, and I want to hear from you kind of like, what is like the number one technology that you're looking at going into the new year that you think is really exciting, is really cool, that should be top of mind for people? Robbie, you wanna kick that off?
Yeah, I think for us, over the next year, AI at the edge. So more than just the ML we're using now, but true AI on the device, and being able to operate that in an offline mode. So not having to connect to the back end. So how are we going to do that? I think we have to look into smaller models, very focused models that would reside on the device, and that's really exciting. Now, whether that happens in 2026 or not, hard to tell. But it's really exciting. I think I mentioned kind of the coaching aspect. So the ability to have something, if we want to use any workflow, just say a pick coach. So if I've got a picking coach that drives me through the workflow and is dynamic enough to not just be the normal pick wave or whatever. That's exciting to me, and I think that's something we're going to be looking at obviously over the next year or two.
Interesting. I like that. And Brian, what do you think?
Well, I to kind of pick up on that, I think that there's a bit of an evolution happening in the software space, the WMS space, around managing that warehouse environment and managing all the intelligent resources that are happening within the warehouse. So watching that evolve within the space, and how we tackle some of these new technologies that are coming into the warehouse, that are relying on that central system to orchestrate and manage, is going to be interesting.
All right, and Nick, your thoughts? One exciting technology you got your eye on for 2026?
I'm going to give you two.
I asked for one, Nick. No, go ahead. Two is good.
Under promise, over deliver. Okay. So keeping it on the packaging side of things, I think from an equipment perspective, it's going to be the equipment that offers less thinking on the packer side. So those automated scanners, the auto boxers, anything that can take the thought process out of it. That's going to increase sustainability or reduce material usage, and enhance quality, and making sure that product gets to the customer on, in the right way that it should and on time. And then secondarily, from a software perspective, much like the wearables that we've been talking about and things like that, just reducing the training time and increasing the efficiency of the packer is going to be tremendous.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's always huge, right? Especially as we talk about some of those labor challenges, and, getting that training time down, right, is going to give you a huge wins. And Shahram, your thoughts? One technology, maybe you could do two, since Nick broke the rules here. What are you looking at? What's really top of mind for 2026?
I think from what I can see on the state side, I think going vertical is the buzz that we hear everywhere. I think space in the US, which was always, at least I come from Asia for the longest time, was always seen as it's an asset that was easily accessible, available. US builds flat, which is why a lot of the Amazon warehouses still are pretty flat, right? I think that norm is changing. I think US is going the Europe way. I think space is becoming a luxury. Finding the right warehouses in the right places is becoming a huge challenge. So I think every supply chain warehouse professional out there is thinking, how can I use that vertical space above? So any technology that allows the warehouse operator to use space vertically and go as tall as possible, I think is where I see 2026, 2027 really leading into. And we see that on a daily basis. From our world, there's a concept called shuttle systems, or four-way pallet shuttle specifically, which has kind of become a rage, right? I mean, this is kind of like the auto store wave back in mid 2000s to the early 2000 AMR AGV wave. Now I see a four-way pallet shuttle wave. Like, we look at every customer who has a storage. They're looking at how can I get more out of the footprint, right? How many more pallets can I put in a particular square feet? So I think all the climbing robots, anything that can climb, racks and bring pallets or cases or totes to a person, is where I see a lot of buzz, at least from our lens point of view, from a robotics and automation standpoint. So I think going vertical and being more space efficient is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing from y'all, right, is trying to get more out of what you already have, right? Whether it's from a space perspective or a labor perspective, right? How do we use technology to take that to the next level without having to kind of reinvent our whole operation, or look at things in a different way, which I think is incredibly smart to approach to do that. And it's great to see the technology to support that there. And we do have a question here, and I'll let you guys take this. Are large language models being used in warehouse and manufacturing automation yet? And where could they add the most value in the future? Who wants to take that one?
I'm pleading the fifth on this one.
I'm just the packaging guy. I can't answer this one.
I know where they're. I can answer this, and there's definitely use for them in the warehouse, especially in the WMS space. I won't get into too particular. I don't want to preempt anything we're doing here at Snapfulfil, but definitely
a little tease there, I think.
Definitely. There's use case there where I see it valuable is really looking at areas that are requiring a lot of analytics, a lot of thought, a lot of decision making, which could be brought down to make faster, more informed decisions. That's where we definitely see some impact there.
I can also take a stab at it. I think LLM is largely generative AI in my head, and I think the use cases are infinite. It's just a question of who can really sit together and figure out what use case can I target to start with. Imagine when everyone uses ChatGPT today, imagine looking at a warehouse KPI dashboard, a chat pops up and say, okay, how many orders did I ship yesterday? And then keep asking it more questions. Right. I think that is very much possible. I'm sure Snapfulfil, the likes of a lot of WMS companies and ourselves, we are trying to build chat engines, which makes KPI absorption a lot more conversational, instead of just going and clicking multiple tabs to see, okay, how many orders did I ship, or where is my bottleneck in my warehouse? just ask a chat and then it'll give you answers. I think it's possible. I think it's there. I won't be surprised by the time the next ProMat or ModX comes by, there'll be a startup that's already talking about this or building this. I think it's very much possible. It's just a question of figuring out what use case can I bring a generative AI into the warehouse. It's very much doable, and I think we will see more of it coming in near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say from my perspective too, I talked to a 3PL recently, and they were simply using like Gemini and their Google Workspace, but they gave access to Gemini for everybody, including the on the floor workers, and that's how they're managing and developing their SOPs and their standard work. They have the workers basically just speak to Gemini, and then Gemini goes and produces the SOP, and they vet it a little bit, and that becomes their reference database too for looking up those different processes. So I think it's a very interesting question. I think there are a lot of applications, as you guys said. It would be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. And yes, to Shahram's point, I think we'll definitely see some startups looking at that stuff coming up in the upcoming trade show season. So we are at time here, and really appreciate you guys joining us and lending us your insights and knowledge as we look at different technologies in the space, like what's happening currently and what's going to be happening into the future as well. And appreciate everybody for tuning in and joining us as well. If you are interested in meeting these guys in person and picking their brains a little more, just a reminder, as we said here, we will, all 5 of us will be in New Jersey on November 13th, starting at 10 a.m. at the Element Logic Automation Innovation Trade Show. And that is one day only. It is free to attend. I think there's going to be about 30 different exhibitors there. This is their 3rd year doing it. Really great space just to hang out in, but also a really great space to see the show and meet a lot of different solution providers as well, and get some ideas for what you could do for your operation coming up. So Shahram, Robbie, Nick, and Brian, thank you so much for joining me today and having this discussion. And thank you to everyone who tuned in, left comments, and hopefully got some insights as well. We will put this recording up. It'll be available from a video perspective immediately after this ends as a replay on both our YouTube channel and our LinkedIn page. And we have recorded the audio too, and that will be available on our podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to podcasts next week as well. So make sure you are subscribed to the new warehouse. And thank you once again, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.